Hello and welcome back to EC Angling. In this episode we're going to be talking about rigging a pop-up with some worms on top. Now, overseas in the UK, it's going to be maggots. But here in the States, it's a lot harder to get maggots, although this time of year, middle of January, we can get them, at least in the area. The worm on the hair is really an effective way of getting a bite, especially when there's really difficult conditions. The fish that you will see right now is one that I got in very horrible conditions down further south in South Carolina recently, and basically it had been very nice weather leading up to when I had the weekend to fish, and then it became extremely windy and the temperature dropped about 20 degrees, super high pressure, below freezing conditions, which is kind of unusual. It does happen, but it had been probably almost in the 70s a few days before, and then when I got there, of course, things all kind of went downhill. But I still managed to fish on this rig with this bait. It was the only fish of the session. I tried a lot of different other baits and rigs and presentations, and yeah, this is the only one that got a fish. So it's something that I like to use during the winter, especially when the smaller fish, sunfish, small catfish, shiners, and if you're obviously have them around roach and rudd and whatnot. So when those fish slow down, this is when this rig really comes into its own, because you're not struggling to keep the worms on the hair. So it's a pretty easy rig to tie, and I like it because in addition to having the worms, there's also the pop-up there. So if a small fish comes along and steals your bunch of worms, then you still have a bait fishing out there. So I like to combine it with a pop-up that I have some confidence in, so it can continue fishing if it gets stripped off the hair, or the worm gets stripped off the hair. So without any more rambling, we're going to take a look at how I assemble it, and we will just kind of assume that you know how to make this rig. It's just my standard blowback rig. I have another video. I think it's time to update that video actually, but showing how to tie that, and this is on a 4-inch long hook link. It is fished in a PVA bag. Now, fishing worm in a PVA bag has some challenges. Obviously, the worm is a bit wet, especially once you chop it open. But I found that even if you might poke a small hole in the bag, but it's largely going to be okay as long as you've got plenty of powder in there to kind of soak up the wetness. And I found that with this presentation, you're able to cast a worm a lot farther than you would otherwise. It would tend to be, it's fairly soft, so it gets ripped off the hair real easily. But with this setup, you're putting it in a bag, so it's kind of packed in there with a little pile of other offerings, and it really withstands the cast a lot better, and you don't have to worry about whether the worm's still on there or not if you're casting 80 plus yards or something. So it's a pretty effective way of presenting this bait. You can also take something like lunch bait's bloodworm liquid and fill the bag up, which is in fact what I did for that fish I was just mentioning, and really kind of have a fairly inert bag mix that doesn't have a whole lot of smell, and then fill it with that bloodworm liquid, and that really goes nicely with a chunk of worm on the hair. So, all right, let's take a look at how we make this. So here we have what is needed to set up the rig. Here's the solid PVA bag rig. There we go. Has a size 6 Gardner Mugga and a little split shot there, and 4 inches of Trickster, and a inline pear lead, and I hollow it out a little bit on the inside of the lead and remove some of the coating that gets in there so that the stem will slide out, easily, which allows the lead to slide away from the hook when you hook a fish, and that way it's less likely to try and yank the hook out of the fish's mouth. So I find it works a lot better that way. And then there's a little split shot here in case the pop-up overbalances a little bit and wants to float up, and we'll hold it down. And it also helps just to turn the hook a little bit and drop it into the fish's lip. So very easy setup to tie. And then I have a loop here so I can change hook lengths should I want to. So first step is take your baiting needle and slide on your pop-up. Now you can do this with different size pop-ups and hooks depending on what size fish and what the conditions are doing. And I tend to like smaller pop-ups in general. Just had more luck with them. This is a this is a 10 millimeter zinger from Munch Baits. So we'll put that on there, and then we have some bait floss. You don't need a whole lot of it. 6 inches is probably enough. So we'll take that, and we'll go ahead and slide the pop-up on to the hair all the way down. So then we have the loop here, and I kind of easier to get the bait floss through. And then we have the important part, the night crawler. So what I do is I take in probably 3/4 inch lengths and put the needle through every 3/4. And so we end up with one worm double back and forth just like that. Take our bait floss, double it over, and pull the worm on. So now we have a worm threaded onto the bait floss. I'm going to take our loop here on the hair and put one end through, and then just tie a series of overhand knots, 4 or 5 typically. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this also acts to form a hair stop, basically. Should the worm get torn off, you won't have to worry about the pop-up sliding off immediately. So we're going to trim off the tag ends, and then we're going to slide the pop-up back up so it's kind of tied up against the worms like that. And then at every bend in the worm, you take and cut. You don't have to do every bend, but I find that seems to work pretty well. And that is it. That is the finished bait there. And as you can see, you have a nice little stack of worms there on top of your pop-up, and it's going to kind of waft nicely. And when the fishing is tough and there's not too many small fish around, this is really hard to beat. So here it is in the water. As you can see, it's wafting perfectly, just right off the bottom. Worm's moving a little bit, and it's leaching out all those nice natural attractants in the worm, and it just looks absolutely perfect for a bite. And oftentimes it is, as long as nothing eats the worm before the carp comes along and finds it. So you can't really get a better presentation than that. So I find for this rig, the Munch Baits Bloodworm Complex Liquid Food is really the best choice I found as far as what to put in a solid bag with this mix. And it's PVA friendly, of course, and if you put it in a condiment bottle similar to this one, there's different shapes and sizes and things, and you could also find them, I think, in the cake decorating section of many stores. But basically it's very easy to inject into the bag, and it's got nice, as you can see, clinging to that bottle, which needs to be refilled. but you can see all the little bloodworms in there, and so it's full of natural attractants there, and bloodworms do really well on a lot of feed studies, which is it's actually often used as a benchmark for testing against other feed stimulants and things, whether chironomid larvae, bloodworms are, if it's better or worse than them. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope this will be useful in your own angling. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I'm going to hope that life smooths out a bit and I'm able to produce more videos, and if I have more people watching, then it makes it all more worthwhile. So thanks again, and I will see you next time.